devo annunciare la morte del nostro Santo Padre Francesco.
Just days after the world mourned the passing of Pope Francis, a voice broke the silence. His sister, Maria Elena. What she revealed didn't just surprise the public, it sent shockwaves through the church itself. Behind the Vatican's solemn rituals and global tributes lies a story that's never been told. A story of private pain, hidden documents, unspoken regrets, and a final deathbed promise that could change everything we thought we knew about the late Pope.
Because of our age difference, I can't really say much about him around the house. But he was always very kind, very protective. That's the picture I still have.
Was Pope Francis carrying a secret that the church never wanted revealed? What happened in his final moments that left his sister shaken? And what truths lie inside the private journal he left behind? Pages that may never be made public? This isn't about scandal for scandal's sake. It's about a man, before he was a pope, who spent his final days wrestling with faith, truth, and the weight of silence. And now, the one person he trusted most is ready to speak. What you're about to hear could rewrite the legacy of one of the most influential religious figures of our time. Stay with us. You won't want to miss what comes next. People thought they knew everything there was to know about Pope Francis's life and impact. But then something odd happened. His sister Maria Elena Bergoglio spoke up all of a sudden after being quiet for years. Maria Elena, the Pope's only living sister, had stayed out of the public eye for a long time. Her brother, Jorge Mario Bergoglio, worked his way up in the church and became one of the most famous religious people in the world. She stayed in Argentina and lived a quiet life. The only time she tried to get attention was when her brother was named Pope in 2013. She didn't have to be quiet. She chose to be quiet for personal reasons and maybe to let her brother's role speak for itself. But the silence stopped soon after he died. In a speech that went viral around the world, Maria Elena talked about her brother's life from her own point of view. Not because it was shocking, but because it was so deeply human. What she said caught me off guard. Few people had ever seen a side of Pope Francis that she brought out in him. She didn't talk about the Pope. She talked about the man who holds that position, the brother she grew up with, the kid whose name was Jorge. To me, he was more than just the Pope, she said in her first TV interview. His name was Jorge, and he was my brother. The kid who played with dogs in the yard, who made me laugh when I was down, who cried the night our dad died. She took a short break and her voice broke a little. The room was quiet, even though it was full of reporters. Then she said something that no one thought she would. I never thought he'd become Pope. No one will ever know how much it cost us. That line made people react right away. What did she really mean? How much did it cost them? Why didn't she say anything about it before? In the days that followed, those questions were all over the news and in talks in Catholic communities around the world, on social media, and in newsrooms. In the eyes of some, Maria Elena's response was a rare break in the papacy's usually smooth and controlled image. For some, it was just a sister speaking from the heart, maybe because of grief, memories, and a need to talk about things that had been hidden for years. It hit a nerve either way. Her words came from the heart, but they were also telling in ways that went beyond personal stories. It gave a hint of the stress Jorge Mario Bergoglio must have been under before he became Pope, and how it may have affected him and those close to him. A lot of people who were paying attention said that Maria Elena's words gave a unique view that wasn't in official Vatican news releases or biographies. It wasn't just about religious beliefs or world peace. It was about family, about how much it cost to be a boss, about the life of a man who was praised for being humble and moral, but who may have had more on his shoulders than most people knew. In a lot of ways, this first discovery set the tone for everything else. Maria Elena's story didn't seem to be trying to hurt her brother's reputation or further any goals. It was honest and seemed very real, and that may be why it hit so close to home. It was well known that Pope Francis was seen by many as a spiritual father. What about Jorge, the man, the brother, the son? It wasn't easy for her to decide to speak out. Friends and family of Maria say she had long thought about whether she should ever share her private feelings with the public. Her brother's part may have made her keep them to herself for years, or she might have been afraid of being misunderstood. But after he died, something changed. She later said that she felt a strong duty, not to protect or expose, but to give more information about the man she knew. By doing this, she made it possible for people to talk about the Pope in a way that had not been common before. During one of those talks, they talked about what it means to be a public person of faith. Maria's words made it sound like, despite the robes and rituals, there was a man who, like everyone else, had times of doubt, regret, and personal battle. This made people think about more than just Pope Francis. It made people think about how leaders work in places that value custom and power over trustworthiness. Was the cost of his job something that had been bothering him for years? Did he talk to anyone else about his worries, or did only his sister really understand what he had given up? These questions were first brought up by journalists and critics from both secular and religious backgrounds. Some people were afraid that the media would make Maria Elena's words sound more important than they were. Others praised her for being brave and thought that what she said was important because it showed that church leaders are still people. This made a lot of Catholics feel different ways. Some people were touched by how honest she was and liked getting to know the Pope on a more personal level. Others were more cautious and would rather talk about his impact of compassion and reform than his personal life. But one thing was certain: Maria Elena's voice had brought something new to the global discussion. Even Vatican officials, who usually don't talk about personal family issues, wouldn't say anything directly about what she said. Instead, they just said again that Pope Francis has dedicated his life to service, faith, and humility. They didn't disagree with what she said, but they also didn't respond to it either. It seemed like the organization knew how strong her voice was without directly supporting or opposing it. Even though it was quiet, this moment marked a big change. For the first time in a long time, the story of a pope wasn't told by theologians, historians, or church spokespersons. Instead, it was told by someone who had grown up with the Pope, knew him before he became a priest, and stayed close to his roots even as he became the most important person in the Catholic Church. In her first statement, Maria Elena didn't come to any big conclusions or make any shocking admissions. She did, however, tell us that even people who seem larger than life are shaped by the people and events that happen to them. And facts that are most important don't always come from public statements. Sometimes they come from family members' quiet thoughts. In her first speech, she talked about how close she was to her brother and how she felt bad about him being a papal figure. But as she went on, she started to talk about more than just her own grief. She talked about family history and long-hidden truths. She spoke in a calm voice, but what she said was important. A lot of people had never heard this side of Pope Francis's life before. As a child in Buenos Aires, Argentina, Jorge Mario Bergoglio was known as Pope Francis. He was born in 1936 into a simple family of workers. They raised their kids with strong Catholic beliefs, strict rules, and an even stronger sense of what was right and wrong. Maria Elena, who was about the same age as him, has clear memories of those early days. She said he was a thoughtful kid who was quiet most of the time but very aware and emotional. In one of her interviews, she said he packed things. Even when he was a kid, he kept things longer than the rest of us. He never let pain go away quickly. He kept it inside. He might have used that part of himself well as a priest and spiritual guide later in life. Many people have never heard of the events that Maria thinks shaped it much earlier. She began to talk about parts of their past that had never been talked about in public before. These weren't tales of trouble or games played in school. These were stories about terrible things that happened and how they affected the family for a long time. Maria said that something happened in their family past that changed everything. She called it a betrayal that wasn't against the church, but against someone much closer to them. It had to do with their dad, and a secret that had been kept for many years. She didn't give all the details. She did not name anyone. She did say that Jorge found out that their father had another family when he was about 12 years old. A secret life that no one knew about, not even their mother. Maria said that the news broke up their family. Not only was she cheating on him, but she also broke his trust in such a deep way that it shook him to his core. She said, that day he stopped being a child. She said that something about him changed after that. He took things more seriously and pulled away. He started going to church more often, and not just because it was the norm. For him, it seemed to give him a sense of order, a place where morals and truth still had depth. Some family members tried to forget about or move on from what had happened, but Jorge was set on finding justice. not to get even, but to understand. Maria said that their grandmother Rosa was also a big impact at that time. People admired and sometimes feared Rosa because she had a very strict moral code. She taught them about having faith, being humble, and giving up things you want. However, Maria said that Rosa also gave Jorge a strong spiritual feeling, like a fire that couldn't be put out. Rosa first told him he should think about becoming a priest, and she also helped him deal with the betrayal that had broken up his family. Maria, on the other hand, said that Jorge might not have joined the church because God told him to. She thinks it was also a way out. She said, he didn't run to God because he felt called. He ran to get away from the shame. That sentence got a lot of attention right away. It's not often that someone says a pope might have become a priest not because he wanted to, but because he needed to make sense of his pain. Maria didn't say this as a complaint, though. The only thing it did was make Pope Francis's well-known picture as a humble and caring leader more complicated. It made me think that his humility wasn't just a spiritual strength, but also a way for him to deal with hurts from the past. Some people found that point of view hard to hear, but it made him more human, not less. As reporters dug deeper into what she said, they found it hard to confirm but impossible to ignore. The things she said weren't wild charges. The way they were said showed that the person had thought about and held on to those feelings for a long time. And they weren't trying to find someone to blame or expose. Instead, they showed a man who was shaped by both public faith and private pain. Then she said something that took everyone by surprise. Maria said that Jorge told her about a set of papers he had put together in the last few years of his life. These weren't records or papers about religion from the church. She said they were personal files with letters, notes, and tapes that he had gathered while he was Archbishop of Buenos Aires and then Pope. The collection had a name, but not many people knew it. Il dossier nascosto, which means the hidden file. Maria said that this title wasn't just a sign. Almost no one could get to the file because it was kept in a safe vault below Vatican City. The story was even more interesting because Jorge had told her about it in person on his last trip to Argentina, before he was elected Pope. He gave her the story along with a letter written by hand and a small key, a real key, she said, to get into the archive in case something happened to him. In the message, he didn't say exactly what was in the file. He instead left behind vague directions. This sentence stood out. If something happens to me and people start to wonder why I didn't say anything about certain things, tell them to look beyond the golden marble. Tell them to look in places where the corner doesn't get any light. Maria said she kept the letter and key secret for many years. She didn't open them until the morning her brother died. She said that what she found shocked her. The letter had what she called a confession in it, not of doing something bad, but of knowing it. In it, Jorge said he had found a web of money laundering, covering up abuse, and secret deals between powerful church leaders and authoritarian governments. He didn't name anyone in that letter, but Maria said he left hints, enough to make it clear that what he had learned had really made him question his faith. He could have gone public, but he picked a different path. Maria said that he chose to change things from the inside because he thought that a slow, careful process would help protect the church's honor. Over time, though, he started to doubt that plan. He told her, "Maybe I was too soft," in one of their last talks. "Maybe I should have been the Pope who stopped the lies instead of the one who kept them going." Some people found it scary to think that Pope Francis might have kept information from people, not out of fear, but out of a sense of duty. For others, it was a very sad thought. Maria said it wasn't about keeping people safe. It was to keep the organization safe. More than anything else, that was what weighed him down in his last years. She didn't say she knew everything about the secret file. She didn't even say that she had gotten to it. But the fact that she was given a key and a letter made it seem like Jorge wanted someone to find out the truth at some point. Now the question was if that time had come. People became more interested in her story as it spread. A lot of people started to wonder if the Vatican would admit that there was such a file or if it would be quietly thrown out. So far, church leaders haven't said anything about it in public. However, Maria Elena's story has started a new conversation in the media and among Catholics that is not just about the impact of one pope. Maria said that the last few days of her brother's life were not calm, but full of activity. She said that Jorge was restless in his last hours, even though he was weak and his health was getting worse. He wasn't thinking about the event or how he looked in public. He was instead thinking about something that had been bothering him for years and that he still hadn't fully solved. She said that he had one last task he wanted to finish, and a truth he felt couldn't die with it. She remembered sitting next to him in his private room where it was quiet. Even though the room was dimly lit and had a quiet vibe, Jorge's face was tense. She gently told him, "You've done everything you could. You should not have had to carry as much as you did." "Let it go now," she told him. But he looked at her, who was pale and weak, and said something she will never forget. "Promise me you'll tell them," he said in a whisper. "It's not just the report. Tell them about the kids." Maria didn't understand. "What children?" she asked. "The ones who were never counted," he said in a voice that was hard to hear. "The ones the church missed. The ones I failed to save." Maria thought for a moment that he might have been using a figure of speech. As he talked, though, it became clear that he meant a very specific thing. She said that Jorge was very upset about what he called quiet tragedies, cases of abuse and mistreatment in the church that had never been reported or made public. These were not the famous crimes that had rocked the Vatican in the last few decades. The events were smaller and more secret. They usually happened in missions that were far away, churches that were poor, or parts of the world where the church had a lot of power, and local authorities didn't have much control. Maria said Jorge thought a lot of the victims were children from developing countries, living in places where it was not only dangerous to speak out against clergy, but also normal to do so. It didn't seem like their stories didn't matter, he just thought that no one was ready to listen. Several of these cases had been quietly tried to be looked into again over the years, he told her. But every time, he ran into opposition, not just from people in the Vatican, but also from bishops and other church leaders in the region who were more afraid of scandal than they were for justice. Maria told me that Jorge often felt alone in these attempts. Even though he was the Pope, he couldn't make things more open without getting in trouble with the people. One of the saddest things she talked about was when he blamed himself. He told her, "I wanted to protect the faith." He told her, "But I ended up protecting the system." She said that sentence meant more to her than anything else he had ever said. It wasn't a statement, it was an admission of guilt. A quiet admission that the organization he had spent his whole life working for had let down the people it was supposed to protect at times. Maria said that he thought the church's structure had turned into a sin in and of itself. It had become so focused on staying alive and so set in its ways that it had forgotten about its most important values, which were justice, kindness, and truth. She held up a small wooden rosary as she talked about these times. The design wasn't fancy or ornate. It wasn't made of gold, metal, or anything else special. It was just old wood that was smooth from being handled for years. It was something Jorge gave her right before he died. He told her that a young boy in Argentina had owned it before and had come to the church for help. Jorge says that the boy was turned away. After a week, the boy killed himself. Jorge had kept that rosary with him for many years, not as a sign of faith, but to tell people to be quiet. When powerful people choose safety over bravery, bad things happen. He told her, "This is what it costs to be quiet." Maria said that the rosary made her unable to keep quiet. She thought that her brother wanted everyone to see the church in all of its moral fight, not just its high church glory. Its biggest mistake wasn't making mistakes he wanted people to understand. It was refusal to admit it. But as she talked, more and more questions came up. Why didn't the Vatican say anything about these claims? Why had no one from the government come forward to respond to or even deny what she said? Why did the government not say anything at all? Maria explained things in her own way. "The church has every reason to stay silent," she said. Not because what she said wasn't true, but because it could be. If people started to ask about the hidden files, the abuse cases that were not reported, and the changes that were not made public, the institution might not be able to handle the scrutiny. She also thought that there were people in the church who cared more about keeping Jorge's image alive than carrying out his last wishes. When the Vatican had problems in the past, showing Pope Francis as a humble and smiling reformer helped rebuild trust. That story would fall apart if he said that he had been stopped or silenced. Maria told them that Jorge didn't want to be known that way. She said he wanted to be remembered honestly, even if it meant talking about the mistakes he felt he made. In his last days, he wasn't interested in myths or legacies. He was interested in the truth, no matter how painful it was. She talked about being broken. On the one hand, she felt the weight of keeping her brother's honor. On the other hand, his last request made her want to speak up not only for himself, but also for the kids he thought were lost. People from all over the world started to send her texts after hearing about her interviews. Some were helpful, some people were mad. But there was one word that stood out. It came from a woman in South America who said she was the sister of one of the people Jorge had helped in the past, but didn't name. It was a short message. Tell his story. Do not forget what he tried to do. For Maria, that's when she realized she had already made up her mind. She could not return. She couldn't take back what her brother had shown her or the words he whispered as he died. Of course. Here is part 4 of your video script. It keeps the same calm, clear, and friendly tone. This part has more than 1,000 words and stays true to the style you asked for. The world was still processing Pope Francis's death and the revelations his sister, Maria Elena Bergoglio, made. At this point, attention turned to the future of the Church. Who would be in charge next? Which way would it go? People outside of Rome were paying attention to the public parts of the papal succession, like the white smoke, the solemn parade, and the inauguration of a new pope. But Maria was already talking about something much scarier. She said that the choice of the next pope might not have been as spontaneous or led by the Holy Spirit as it seemed. She said that her brother already knew who would take over after him, and, even scarier, why. During one of their last talks, Maria remembered Jorge looking at her with a quiet fear on his face. He said, "They've already picked him." He didn't say more when she asked who they were. Instead, he used a name that most people outside of the Vatican didn't know: Cardinal Matteo Tedesco. Tedesco was becoming more important in the Roman Curia. He was well-liked not only by church leaders, but also by people in the media and politics because of his charm, intelligence, and ability to work with others. People often said nice things about how he communicated and how well he organized things. Maria said that her brother had real worries behind this smooth exterior. It was her story that Jorge had found letters that suggested Tedesco had made unofficial promises to important church groups. Promises that, if kept, could stop some of the investigations that Pope Francis had worked for years to start up again. Maria said that these supposed promises had nothing to do with doctrine or religion. They were about church records from inside the organization, especially abuse cases from the late 1980s to the early 2000s in places like South America, parts of Africa, and Eastern Europe. There wasn't a lot of paperwork or monitoring in these places, and cases were rarely, if ever, looked into by people outside of the local dioceses. It was also the same information that Jorge had wanted to make public, especially as he got older. Maria said that her brother had become more alone since these files became public. He saw changes in his plan, less time spent in public. Meetings with independent detectives were called off. Even some of his closest advisors were fired or given new jobs all of a sudden. At first, he thought it was because of health issues. But then he started to think there was something more going on. Maria said that Jorge thought that some church leaders had planned the future of the Pope even while he was still alive. And as his health got worse, those attempts got stronger. He was afraid that anyone who tried to reveal the truth would be quietly put on hold by people who didn't want to spark old wounds that the church had been working hard to heal for decades. Maria talked about a particularly scary event. Jorge was writing an official letter called a pastoral letter that was supposed to explain his views on how the church should be more open and fair about its past. She said it was a well-thought-out but strong call for institutions to be honest. He planned to put it out soon before stepping away from public life. But Maria said the paper was put on hold because of stress a few weeks before it was supposed to be finalized. It was never put out there, and there is still no public record of it in the Vatican's files. What happened next only made the puzzle bigger. Maria said that as Jorge's health got worse, he worried more and more about what would happen to the papers, letters, and notes he had made over the years. He was aware that they were caring, He knew they would make people think. He thought they were telling the truth, though. That was more important to him than leaving a perfect memory. Then something happened that she wasn't ready for. Maria said she got a letter from someone she didn't know soon after Jorge died. The message was clear. Be careful what you say. It was short, only 3 lines. Your brother died in a good way. Don't make everyone question that. This wasn't just a message to her. It proved what they said. Proof that other people knew what Jorge had been trying to keep secret, and maybe even what he had hoped would be revealed in the end. She wasn't scared by the letter, but it made her feel uneasy. It proved that the call to remain silent wasn't just a show of support. It was running. That brought up the most important part of Maria's story. Also, she said that Pope Francis had left her something even more personal, a wooden chest in her home in Buenos Aires. He had also given her the key to a secret Vatican library. She said that scribbled journals from the last 2 years of Jorge's life were inside. She said that these journals were not public or formal. They had a lot of meaning and were often written in code. Jorge started to keep them soon after a big health scare in 2023. He told Maria on the phone, "I don't know how much longer I'll be able to speak freely, but my hand still works. I'll write what my voice can't say anymore." Maria said that what he wrote shocked even her. In the entries, he wrote about talks with high-level officials who, as he put it, tried to get him to stop looking into cases of abuse from the past. He wrote about how he felt pushed to pick courtesy over responsibility. It broke his heart, and he wrote about it. He wrote some very disturbing things like, "To protect the institution by denying the truth is to crucify Christ again." Maria let a few writers she knew and trusted look at certain pages. One of them, Italian investigative reporter Luca Morelli, called the journal the most damning portrait of internal Vatican resistance I've ever read. He also said that if the whole journal were verified and made public, it could cause a crisis among Christians all over the world, not just in the church. The journal's last note, which was made 3 days before Jorge died, was very short. It's almost like saying goodbye. "If this is my last breath, let it not be in vain," it said. The shepherd shouldn't be scared of the dark because wolves howl loudest when they think it's morning. Maria told me that Jorge left behind more than just the book. He had put a sealed envelope in the same box. It had one line written on it, "In case of betrayal." She hasn't opened it yet. She says she's waiting for the right time when she's sure it won't be thrown out, destroyed, or taken away without being looked at. Some people think the package might have a list of names in it. Some people think it might include audio records or first-hand accounts. Maria thinks Jorge wanted whatever was inside to be used as a safety net, proof of the truth in case someone tried to erase it. Since he died, she says she has been called by several people, some from the church and some from outside the church, who all want to know about the journal. Some were nice, some were not. She has been told not to share it because it could lead to confusion or be taken in the wrong way. She says Jorge was clear, though. He didn't want the truth to hurt the church, but to help it get better. Now she has to make a decision that she can't do. Keep Pope Francis's image as a beloved reformer, or show the person he really was. The person who may have been trying to lift the final veil on an institution he both loved and feared in his last days. Maria recently said that she has been getting letters from people who have been abused. Some of these people think that Jorge's journals may have written about their cases. They begged her to tell them what she knows. This isn't just about history for them, it's about ending things, it's about being fair. It's also about being heard, maybe for the first time.